Welcome back to Movies Outpost. Today we'll be diving into an action thriller film titled The King. Enjoy the recap. Our tale begins in the early 15th century, where an English knight by the name of Henry Percy, but most folks just call him Hotspur, is on the front line, rebelling against the nearby kingdoms. Fresh off the back of another winning fight against the Scots, Hotspur turns to his king, seeking help to pay off the ransom Wales is demanding for his cousin. But the king's having none of it. He sees it as more of a nuisance than a responsibility. Hotspur, miffed by the king's refusal, calls him out, bringing up the long years of loyalty his family has given to the crown. In a huff, he leaves the room. In the meantime, Prince Henry has chosen to live a simple life as Hal, an ordinary town dweller. The allure of power or political influence doesn't interest him. His days are filled with the company of women and drinking sessions with his friend John Falstaff, a knight who hung up his armor a while ago. One sunny afternoon, a messenger from the castle comes looking for him. The king's health is failing and he wishes to see his son. Henry at first declines the summons, but after a heart-to-heart chat with John, he realizes avoiding the encounter might be an even bigger mistake, leaving him with a lifetime of regret. So Henry musters the courage and pays a visit to his ailing father, who confirms what Henry suspected. The throne will bypass Henry, and instead, it's destined for his younger brother Thomas. The king felt obligated to share this, despite knowing that Henry had no real desire for the crown. Henry takes the news in stride. However, he's troubled when he learns that Thomas is due to go head-to-head against Hotspur the very next day. Henry fears the younger generation shouldn't have to carry on their father's squabbles, but his concerns fall on deaf ears with Thomas. That evening, Henry finds it hard to enjoy anything, his thoughts preoccupied with his brother Thomas stepping into harm's way. As dawn breaks, he decides to visit the battlefield where his brother is stationed. Thomas isn't exactly thrilled to see Henry there, but Henry brushes off the cold reception. He isn't there to bask in the glory, he's there to protect his brother. Deciding to challenge Hotspur to a one-on-one duel, he sends a messenger with his challenge. Hotspur accepts, disregarding his father's wishes. Both Henry and Hotspur are known for their prowess in battle, leading to an evenly matched duel. The clash begins with swordplay, but soon the swords are lost and it boils down to a bare-knuckle brawl. After an intense struggle, Henry tackles Hotspur to the ground, using a hidden dagger to land the decisive blow. This one-on-one victory averts a massive battle, saving numerous lives on both sides. But Thomas doesn't see it that way. In his view, Henry has stolen the limelight that was supposed to help him establish his leadership. Weighed down by the guilt of taking a life, Henry slips back into his former life of revelry. A few days pass, and Sir William Gascoigne, the king's chief justice, comes looking for Henry. Thomas, unfortunately, fell in a subsequent battle, and the king is now on his deathbed. So Henry is called back to the palace to prevent the kingdom from spiraling into chaos without a clear successor. Racked with anger at the loss of his brother, Henry confronts his dying father, labeling him a monster just before the old king breathes his last. The responsibility of ruling the country now rests on Henry's shoulders. As the preparations for the coronation get underway, a team of servants heads to Henry's humble abode in the town to gather his personal belongings. John is evicted and gets the distressing news about his friend from a servant, not getting a chance to see Henry before his royal transition. The coronation ceremony proceeds flawlessly, and later at the celebratory dinner, Henry starts opening gifts sent by other kings. He receives a gold chalice, which he passes on to his sister, Queen Philippa of Denmark, and a mechanical bird, which he gives to his cousin, the Earl of Cambridge. But the final gift leaves him surprised. The Dauphin of France has sent him a simple ball, without any accompanying message. Henry decides to keep it, a memento of his simpler past. However, the next day, Sir William Gascoigne interprets the ball as a slight from the French. He proposes a retaliatory response, but Henry, preferring peace over conflict, opts to focus on internal matters, hoping to avoid escalating the feud with France. As Henry spends some time with Philippa before her departure, she advises him to tread carefully. The royal court, she warns, is full of people with their own agendas, and a king can never be sure of who to trust. The following day, the Archbishop of Canterbury tries to educate Henry about the genealogy of the French king, in case he might need to stake a claim to the throne. But this fails to capture Henry's interest. Despite his father's ambitions, Henry has no intention of invading France or Jerusalem. His decision, however, doesn't go down well with the court nobles. Once the meeting wraps up, Gascoigne applauds Henry's concern for his people, but he also criticizes his inaction towards France's provocation, fearing it makes him appear weak. On the other side of town, John is getting a taste of life without his royal friend's companionship. He's no longer welcomed warmly in the local taverns, and he's expected to foot his own bills. Mentioning his high-ranking friend only earns him a scoffing reminder from the innkeeper that he's been left behind like an aged hound. Sometime later, Henry finds himself questioning a captive seeking asylum in return for critical information. The man claims to have been sent by the French king to assassinate Henry. The court nobles see this as a clear declaration of war. However, Henry doesn't relent. He sends a letter back to the French king, calling out his cowardice for sending an assassin instead of a proper army if war is what he truly wants. His decision creates unease among the nobles. The Earl of Cambridge and Lord Grey find themselves being wooed by French agents, offering them an enticing opportunity to switch sides. Losing faith in their king and tempted by the French offer, they seek Gascoigne's counsel. Having pledged to address the issue, Gascoigne once again engages Henry, warning him that ignoring these brewing problems could spell disaster. He sees this as Henry's chance to rally the kingdom under a unified banner. With limited options, Henry finally consents to wage war against France, considering the French agent's actions towards his nobles as the last straw. In his disappointment, he orders the execution of the Earl of Cambridge and Lord Grey, once deemed friends, now traitors. In need of a reliable confidant, Henry seeks out John in the town. John, feeling overlooked, receives an apology from Henry for the lack of communication. With the kingdom's issues at hand, Henry needs his best friend by his side. He proposes that John serve as the marshal of his chief military strategist. John agrees, on one condition: Henry must clear his debt at the local inn. After some time, Henry and his army set sail for France. Upon landing, they come across a deserted village and choose to set up camp. They begin constructing catapults to launch an attack on Harfleur. Hoping to win through a siege and avoid unnecessary casualties early in the campaign, Henry perseveres despite the lack of immediate results. The nobles grow restless, with the archbishop pushing for an attack, but Henry stands firm. This time, Gascoigne supports him, underlining the strategic importance of establishing a garrison and supply line from England here. Fortunately, their patience pays off, and Harfleur capitulates. The local leader requests only one concession: that the women and children be allowed to leave, which Henry grants. Later, they are visited by Louis, the Dauphin of France, who paints a graphic picture of the fate awaiting Henry and his troops should they refuse to surrender. Henry acknowledges the power of Louis's words but bids him good night, unperturbed. He then asks John to prepare the army to march again. After considerable travel, they set up camp again and send 3 young pages to collect firewood. Louis encounters them and mercilessly kills 2, sending the third back to camp with a severed head as a chilling message. In reaction to this brutal act, Henry orders John to execute all their French captives and display their bodies on spikes by the river. But John staunchly refuses, maintaining that they are not such ruthless men. The following day, as Henry and his army advance, they reach the hills only to be confronted by a daunting sight: Louis's army greatly outnumbering them. The nobles recommend a retreat, but John interrupts with a strategic plan. He points out that the terrain between the two armies forms a natural basin that could turn into a muddy bog if it rains, a prediction he's confident of due to his aching knee. This could prove disastrous for the French, heavily armed and mounted on horses, as they risk getting stuck in the bog. The plan is to use a few of Henry's men as bait to draw the French into this trap. Once stuck, the remaining English troops, unburdened by heavy armor, can launch a swift and agile attack. Coupled with Henry's skilled archers, their speed could offer a significant advantage. The nobles dismiss this strategy as ridiculous, but Henry, trusting John, decides to give it a shot. They agree that if it rains overnight, they will launch their attack in the morning. Fortunately, the weather complies with their strategy, and with the dawn's light, the army prepares to execute the plan. Seeing John prepare to lead the bait party, Henry protests and decides instead to challenge Louis to a single combat, as he had with Hotspur. Dismissive of Henry's offer, Louis rebuffs it, smugly secure in his numerical advantage and insinuating that Henry's proposal arises from fear of defeat. Henry, although incensed, maintains his resolve and returns to his troops. He delivers an inspiring speech, rallying their spirits before retreating into the woodland as the decoy group ventures out to engage the enemy. Louis takes the bait and prematurely sends out half his forces, only to have them ensnared in a rain of arrows and mired in the bog as John had foreseen. The decoy group hampers the French enough to slow their progress. As Louis dispatches the rest of his army, Henry and his unarmored forces enter the fray. As predicted, their maneuverability gives them a significant edge over the French soldiers struggling in the mud. Only when he realizes the battle is slipping away does Louis seek a duel with Henry. But Henry refuses to engage with a prince who continually slips in the mud, considering it a mockery of a real fight. Instead, he gives his soldiers permission to dispatch Louis. Following such an impressive victory, Henry gains the profound respect of his entire army. However, the triumph is overshadowed by grief as he finds John's lifeless body on the battlefield. Mourning his friend, and in a fit of rage, he orders his men to execute all the prisoners before they can regroup. Days turn into weeks, and finally the French monarch requests a meeting with Henry, prepared to admit defeat, albeit with one term. Henry must take his daughter, Princess Catherine of Valois, as his wife. Recognizing the potential this union holds for consolidating royal families and preventing future discord, Henry consents. Aboard the ship back to England, Henry and William share a deeply emotional dialogue about Flagstaff, with Henry expressing his gratitude for William's unwavering loyalty. William in return acknowledges Henry's rightful place as one of England's finest kings. As they return home, they're met with eager citizens ready for the royal wedding. However, before they make a public appearance, Henry desires a private discussion with Catherine. Catherine makes it clear to Henry that her obedience won't come easily. He'll have to work to gain her respect. Moreover, she questions the reasons behind England's aggression towards France, stating that her family never intended to start a war or assassinate Henry. Her father, she insists, was a benevolent king with no wish for conflict. Stirred by these words of warning and nagging suspicions, Henry confronts Gascoigne, who is preoccupied with getting his attire mended by a young lad. Henry begins by inquiring about the method of unearthing the alleged assassin. Gascoigne's story, however, lacks coherence and is filled with evasiveness. As Henry probes the noticeable enlargement of Gascoigne's dominions following the subjugation of France, Gascoigne's composure shatters and he confesses. He admits to concocting France's supposed instigations but shows no remorse, asserting that it ultimately served Henry's ambitions. In Gascoigne's view, authentic peace can only be achieved through triumph, and now their realms have at last become one. In a last-ditch attempt to placate Henry, Gascoigne kneels in subservience, but Henry, burning with a sense of treachery, ends Gascoigne's life with a swift stab of his dagger. A brief, silent exchange of looks occurs between Henry and the young boy before Henry takes his leave. Following this unsettling encounter, Henry seeks out Catherine, pleading for her unwavering honesty in their relationship. As she solemnly swears to uphold her promise, the jubilant cries of Henry's name from the crowd outside fill the air. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.